The airlock hissed like a bored snake, opening into Selene's cradle, a lunar colony that could best be described as functional in the same way a broken knife still technically cuts. Arlo Thorne stepped through, dust clinging to his boots like unpaid debts. "Welcome home," he muttered to no one, because that's what you do when the only company you have is the echo of your own voice. The corridor stretched ahead, a drab metal tube snaking through the rock like some kind of budget nightmare. Posters peeling off the walls advertised last year's colony fair, promising fun for the whole family, without mentioning the occasional oxygen shortage that added a lovely element of surprise to the festivities. Arlo's work as a cosmic archaeologist hardly paid, but it kept him away from the kind of corporate soul-sucking jobs that made jumping into a black hole seem appealing. He had a knack for finding ancient alien relics, which was ironic since his own life was as chaotic as a drunk asteroid in a gravity well. "Hey, Arlo," a voice rang out, as grating as it was familiar. Marlowe, the colony's unofficial bartender, leaned against the doorway of his bar, the Black Hole, which was every bit as inviting as its name suggested. "Marlowe," Arlo replied, feigning enthusiasm like a man dancing on a minefield. "Still serving that drink you call a cocktail. Tastes like rocket fuel mixed with regret." Marlowe chuckled, a sound like gravel being mashed, only for my favorite customers. "Speaking of which, word is the precogs are sniffing around again." Arlo snorted. "Precogs, the galaxy's worst voyeurs. They can see the future but can't figure out why their relationships never last. Yeah, well, they're interested in us humans. Apparently we muck up their visions. Makes them nervous. Nervous aliens, great. Just what we need. Maybe they'll bring us a fruit basket." Arlo shrugged, slipping past Marlowe into the bar. It was dimly lit, partly because it was atmospheric, but mostly because the colony couldn't afford proper lighting. Inside, patrons nursed drinks like they might be the last they'd ever have, which, given the colony's maintenance schedule, wasn't entirely pessimistic. Arlo slid onto a stool, the kind that wobbled just enough to make sitting an adventure. "Pour me something strong enough to erase today's memories," Arlo said. Marlowe obliged, sliding a murky liquid across the counter. "This might erase tomorrow's too." "No guarantees." Arlo took a sip, grimacing as the concoction burned a path down his throat. "Tastes like courage and poor decisions. Call it existential bomb," Marlowe said with a smirk. Suddenly, the bar's screen flickered to life, a news feed blaring with the subtlety of a supernova. An image of the precog's crystalline ships appeared, hovering ominously over a distant moon. "As if we didn't have enough problems," Arlo muttered. "Now we have to deal with aliens who treat us like a cosmic jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces." Marlowe leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "I heard they are after something specific. Something only we can find." Arlo raised an eyebrow. "Please tell me it's not another relic. I just got rid of the last one, and it tried to communicate by burning holes in my floor." "Wouldn't be surprised," Marlowe replied. "They say there's an ancient device buried somewhere near the cradle. Something important, important enough for precogs to break a sweat." "Now there's an image." Arlo chuckled darkly. "Well, if they're looking for chaos, they've come to the right species. We practically invented it." The door to the bar swung open, letting in a blast of cold lunar air and a woman clad in a spacesuit that had seen better days. She walked with the kind of purpose that usually meant trouble. "Arlo Thorne?" she asked, her voice like a laser cutter slicing through the ambient noise. "Depends," Arlo replied, raising his glass. "Are you here to arrest me, marry me, or sell me something I don't need?" She smirked, a flash of teeth. "None of the above. I'm Cassandra." "I've got a proposition." Marlowe snorted, wiping down the counter with a rag that was more bacteria than fabric. "Propositions in this place are like airlocks. They open up to nothing good." Cassandra ignored him, fixing her gaze on Arlo. "I need someone who knows the terrain, someone who's comfortable with unpredictability." Arlo sighed, downing the rest of his drink. "I've got unpredictability in spades." What exactly are we talking about? She leaned closer, her eyes gleaming like distant stars. There's something buried in the old excavation site. Something the precogs want. I need you to find it before they do, me against a race of precognitive aliens. Sounds fair. Arlo rubbed his chin, considering. What's in it for me, aside from a one-way trip to Oblivion credits? She replied, more than you've ever seen. Enough to buy your own moon and drink yourself into a permanent stupor. Marlo chimed in. That's the kind of offer you can't refuse. Mostly because if you do, she'll probably shoot you. Cassandra straightened, her face a mask of seriousness. Time's short, Arlo. The precogs aren't known for their patience. Well, who am I to deny some pushy aliens their heart's desire? Arlo stood, the weight of the decision settling like the gravity he missed from Earth. I'll help, but don't expect miracles. Just a lot of swearing and the occasional stroke of genius. Good, Cassandra said, a hint of relief softening her features. We leave at dawn. Be ready. With that she turned and strode out of the bar, leaving Arlo to wonder when dawn was on a moon that didn't exactly follow Earth's timetable. Looks like you're in for a hell of a ride, Marlo said, refilling Arlo's glass. Yeah, Arlo replied, watching the liquid slosh. Here's hoping I survive long enough to regret it. He downed the drink, the taste of adventure and impending doom mixing with the alcohol. Arlo Thorne, unlikely hero, cosmic archaeologist, and the universe's favorite chew toy, was about to embark on another journey. As he left the bar, the lights flickered, casting shadows that danced like mocking specters. The lunar dust grated under his boots, a reminder of the unforgiving world he'd chosen to call home. But there was comfort in chaos, and Arlo had long since learned that sometimes the best way to face the future was with a half smile and a full flask. He stepped into the corridor, the colony's dim lighting barely illuminating the path ahead. He had no illusions about heroics or glory. More likely, it would end like everything else in Celine's cradle, messy, awkward, and with a bill he couldn't pay. But for now, there was a job to do, a mystery to solve, and the slim chance that he'd come out the other side with more than just another scar. Arlo grinned into the shadows, because if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was diving headfirst into the unknown with a cynical quip and a complete disregard for the consequences. He was going to need it more than ever. The lunar corridor felt like a bad dream, the kind you wake up from sweating and swearing you'll never touch whiskey again. Arlo Thorne ambled down the path, each step bringing him closer to whatever half-baked scheme he had unwittingly signed up for. The air was cold, the kind that didn't just chill your bones, but also your will to live. A fitting ambience for a man who could find chaos in a monastery. A soft beep interrupted his musings. His comm device vibrated against his hip like an annoyed insect. Arlo flipped it open, expecting another sales pitch for lunar insurance. Instead, a message scrawled across the screen, artifact found. Nullify precogs. Meet in Dock 7. Midnight. Cryptic, Arlo muttered to himself, half impressed. He always had a soft spot for mysteries, probably because they didn't involve answering to a boss. He pocketed the device, his mind already twisting the possibilities into a knot. Arlo's first stop was Kestrel Voss, the colony's most intuitive engineer, which was akin to being the soberest drunk at a bachelor party. Kestrel was busy dismantling a pile of machinery that looked like it was one bad day away from becoming a bomb. Arlo, Kestrel said without looking up, his fingers working through the wires like they were extensions of his thoughts. What brings you to my little corner of hell? Got a job, Arlo replied, leaning against the doorway with the kind of casual air that suggested he might bolt at any moment. Could use someone who knows their way around unpredictability. Kestrel finally looked up, his eyes narrowing like a cat deciding whether to pounce or nap. Unpredictability is my middle name. Kestrel dangerously unpredictable Voss. What's the gig? Artifact retrieval, Arlo said, scratching his chin like it might help him find the right words. Something that makes the precogs nervous precogs. Now there's a sight to see. And I suppose this involves sticking it to predictive algorithms. No one ever accused me of playing it safe, Arlo grinned. You in? Kestrel shrugged, wiping his hands on a rag that had probably once been white. Could use the exercise. And the credits. I'm tired of being paid in recycled air and IOU. Great. Now I just need a historian who doesn't balk at rewriting history, Arlo said, smirking. Dr. Juno Miles, Kestrel suggested, already anticipating Arlo's next question. Knows everything about everything. Also, she hates precogs. Something about them ruining her thesis. Perfect, Arlo said, already considering it a done deal. I'll go fetch her. You get ready. Midnight, Dock 7. He left Kestrel to his mechanical entrails, knowing the man would be ready when the time came. The next stop was the colony's somewhat grandiosely titled Library of Historical Curiosities, which was mostly a room full of dusty books and a librarian with an attitude problem. Dr. Juno Miles greeted him with a glare that could have melted titanium. Arlo Thorne. What do you want? Good to see you too, Juno, Arlo replied, unfazed. I've got a job that needs your particular brand of historical cynicism. Cynicism is just a fancy word for experience, Juno said, turning a page in her book with the kind of delicate care reserved for things you'd rather set on fire. What's the job? Arlo leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Artifact. Precogs. Nullification. Interested, Juno's eyes lit up with a mix of curiosity and something that was probably illegal in most systems. Precogs are a blight on academic freedom, ruining theories before they can even be published. I'm in, great. Midnight, Dock 7. Bring your pessimism and an open mind, Arlo said, turning to leave before she could think of reasons to back out. Arlo, Juno called after him, you do realize this could get us all killed. Wouldn't be the first time, Arlo shot back with a grin, and probably not the last. With his team assembled, Arlo had a few Iors to kill before their midnight rendezvous. He wandered back to the black hole, the only place where the drinks were consistently inconsistent. Marlo was wiping down the bar when Arlo walked in. Back so soon. I thought you were off saving the galaxy. Just gathering the troops, Arlo replied, sliding onto a stool. Can't save the galaxy without a drink in hand. Marlo poured him a glass of something brown and questionable. So, who's the lucky crew? Kestrel and Juno. Figured I needed brains and brawn that wouldn't immediately jump ship. Sounds like a motley crew, Marlo said, tapping the bar with a knowing look. Got a plan? Plans are for people who don't have imagination. Arlo smirked, downing his drink. We're playing this one by ear. The bar's screen flickered again, reminding everyone that the universe was still largely indifferent to their existence. The news was all precogs all the time. Their ships were inching closer to Selene's cradle, an ominous reminder that time wasn't exactly on their side. Better get going, Marlo said, nodding towards the screen. Wouldn't want to keep the future waiting. Arlo chuckled, slipping off the stool. The future will just have to take a number. He left the bar, the weight of what lay ahead settling on his shoulders like a particularly needy cat. If he was going to pull this off, he'd need more than just a crack team and a vague idea of what an artifact-nullifying precogs even looked like. He'd need luck, cunning, and the kind of stubbornness that could make stars reconsider their orbits. As the clock inched closer to midnight, Arlo made his way to Dock 7. By the time he arrived, Kestrel and Juno were already there, exchanging words that bordered on sarcastic banter. You made it, Juno said, crossing her arms. I was half expecting you to back out, and miss the chance to outwit a bunch of nosy aliens. Never, Arlo replied, his tone dripping with feigned bravado. So what's the plan? Kestrel asked, adjusting a tool belt that looked like it had been cobbled together from several bad decisions. We just wander in and hope the artifact jumps into our laps, more or less, Arlo admitted. But first, we need to make sure the precogs don't see us coming. Got any tricks up your sleeve? Kestrel grinned, pulling out a small device that looked like it had been assembled in a junkyard. Signal jammer. Should scramble any predictive tech long enough for us to be a very annoying blip on their radar. Juno nodded approvingly, her skepticism momentarily taking a backseat. And what about the artifact? Any idea what we're looking for? Not a clue, Arlo confessed. But I figure if it's powerful enough to make precogs itchy, it'll stand out. Right, Juno said dryly. Because ancient technology always comes with a user manual. With a shared look of what could generously be called camaraderie, the trio boarded the modest shuttle waiting in the dock. It was an older model, stitched together from salvaged parts and hope, but it would do for a trip into the unknown. As the shuttle lifted off, the moon's surface receded beneath them, the colony's lights shrinking to pinpricks in the distance. Arlo manned the controls, piloting them toward the old excavation site that had become their target. Keep an eye out for anything that looks like it doesn't belong, Arlo instructed, his eyes scanning the horizon. And for the love of whatever passes for gods out here, let's try not to die. Kestrel fiddled with his signal jammer, the device humming softly as it worked its technical magic. This thing should give us a window. Just don't ask how it works. Even I'm not entirely sure. Juno peered out the viewport, the moon's barren landscape rolling by in silent testimony to centuries of cosmic indifference. You ever wonder why we do this? She asked, her voice uncharacteristically reflective. Arlo shrugged, focusing on keeping the shuttle steady. Because staying put is boring and I've got a death wish disguised as a career. Fair point, Juno conceded, a small smile creeping onto her face. But let's try to make it through this one. Okay. The shuttle descended, its landing gear crunching into the lunar dust with a soft thud. The old excavation site loomed before them, a collection of half-buried structures and forgotten debris. It was the kind of place that history forgot to remember, which made it perfect for hiding something the precogs wanted. As they disembarked, the trio surveyed their surroundings, each taking a moment to appreciate the gravity of what lay ahead. Arlo, ever the optimist, clapped his hands together and grinned. All right, he said, his voice echoing in the thin air. Let's go find ourselves an artifact. Kestrel and Juno nodded, their skepticism tempered by necessity. Together, they moved toward the ruins, each step a reminder that sometimes the best way to face the future was by digging up the past. Arlo stood at the edge of the lunar ruins, squinting at the dark, foreboding entrance like it had personally insulted him. The ancient architecture loomed in front of them, a grim reminder that even in the vacuum of space, bad design choices could stand the test of time. Well, it's not the Hilton, but it'll do, Arlo said, glancing at his companions. Anyone care for a complimentary death trap? Kestrel adjusted his tool belt with an air of resigned hope. I've seen worse. And by worse, I mean the time I tried to fix a reactor with duct tape and a prayer. Let's just hope this place doesn't have an airlock surprise waiting for us, Juno remarked, peering into the shadowy depths. I'd rather not spend my last moments floating away into the great nothing. Now there's a motivational poster if I ever heard one, Arlo chuckled, stepping forward with the confidence of a man who hadn't yet realized he was about to make a series of terrible decisions. They entered the ruins, the corridor stretching out before them like the digestive tract of some ancient, labyrinthine beast. Dust floated in the dim light, disturbed by their passage and settling back into its eternal rest as they moved on. Anyone else feel like we're walking into a bad horror vid? Kestrel asked, glancing around. I half expect to see here be monsters scrawled on the wall, Arlo grinned. As long as the monsters are as lost as we are, we might be okay. The deeper they went, the more the ruins revealed their secrets, or rather, their distinct lack of a cleaning crew. Layers of grime and forgotten relics cluttered the hallways, each turn offering the promise of tetanus or an unfortunate encounter with an alien species version of a Roomba. So Juno began, her voice echoing slightly. Anyone have a plan for when we inevitably trip every alarm system these precogs left behind? Plan. Arlo said, pretending to contemplate. I was thinking we just wing it and let chaos be our guide. Great, Kestrel muttered, holding up his signal jammer like a shield. I'll just keep playing tech god and pray nothing asks me for a password. Just then, the ground beneath them shuddered, a low rumble that spoke of mechanisms awakening after eons of slumber. The walls themselves seemed to shift slightly, as if the ruins were waking up and stretching after a long nap. "Well, that's not ominous at all," Juno commented, her sarcasm sharper than a plasma blade. "Think they've got a welcome mat around here?" Arlo held up a hand. "Quiet. Listen." The air was filled with the soft hum of machinery, the sound growing louder as they moved further into the ruins. It was like being swallowed by a giant mechanical beast, the walls thrumming with energy and anticipation. "Anyone else getting the feeling the precogs have a surprise party planned?" Kestrel asked. "Yeah, and I bet we're the piñatas," Arlo replied, scanning the area for anything that looked remotely like a control panel. "Keep your eyes peeled for anything that doesn't scream ancient ruin." And then they saw it, a console jutting out from the wall, an anachronism in the midst of the crumbling grandeur. Arlo approached it with the confidence of a man who had broken more devices than he'd fixed. "Juno, any idea what this thing is?" he asked, waving her over. Juno examined the device, her fingers brushing over the controls with the familiarity of a scholar and the caution of someone who'd been electrocuted one too many times. "Looks like a security system. Precog tech, most likely. If they're trying to predict our every move, this is where they're watching." "Great. Let's give them a show they won't forget," Arlo said, grinning. Kestrel joined them, his fingers dancing over the signal jammer. "I'll boost the jamming signal. Should make whatever they see look like a bad acid trip. Here's hoping they're not into interpretive dance," Juno quipped, her eyes focused on the screen. Arlo nodded, feeling the weight of their situation settle in his stomach like bad space rations. "Let's see if we can rewrite a little history, shall we?" With a flick of a switch and a prayer to the gods of chaos, Kestrel activated the jammer. The console sparked and fizzled, the screen going haywire as the device did its work. The ruins around them seemed to groan in protest, as if the very stones were aware of the intrusion. Arlo couldn't help but chuckle, despite the circumstances. "Looks like we pissed them off." "Good," Juno said, her smile tinged with defiance. "Let them try to predict this." Suddenly, a series of lights flickered on, illuminating a path through the ruins. It was like a ghostly breadcrumb trail, beckoning them deeper into the labyrinth. "Think they are leading us to the artifact?" Kestrel asked, skepticism laced with curiosity. "Or the incinerator," Juno replied, her voice dry enough to start a fire. "Well, I've always wanted to die in a blaze of glory," Arlo said, taking the first step down the illuminated path. "Let's go see what's at the end of the rabbit hole." Together they followed the lights, moving with the kind of reckless determination that only those with nothing left to lose could muster. The path twisted and turned, leading them through the bowels of the ruins until they reached a door that didn't belong. It was sleek, metallic, and suspiciously new, like the precogs had just popped by and installed it last Tuesday. Arlo stared at it, his mind racing with possibilities. "Think this is it?" Kestrel asked, his voice tinged with anticipation. "Only one way to find out," Arlo replied, reaching for the door's control panel. With a hiss of depressurization, the door slid open, revealing a chamber bathed in an eerie blue light. In the center of the room sat a pedestal, and upon it, an artifact that seemed to defy description. It pulsed with energy, casting strange shadows that danced along the walls. "Now that's what I call a party favor," Juno said, all mingling with sarcasm. Arlo moved forward, feeling the weight of the artifact's presence like a tangible force. "Let's grab it and get the hell out of here." As he reached for the artifact, the chamber filled with a low hum, the air vibrating with energy. Arlo hesitated, a nagging feeling tugging at the back of his mind. "Wait," Kestrel said, his voice urgent. "If this place has security, there's no way they'd leave this unguarded." Juno nodded, eyeing the artifact warily. "It's too easy. There's got to be a catch." Arlo considered their words, the reality of their situation crashing down like a meteor shower. So what do? We can't just leave it here, no, but maybe we can outsmart them, Juno suggested, her mind racing with possibilities. If we can find a way to disable whatever trap they've set, then we can walk out of here like we own the place, Kestrel finished, his eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and fear. Arlo nodded, determination settling in his gut like a lead weight. All right, let's find a way to nullify their foresight and get out of here alive. They moved around the chamber, searching for anything that might be the key to disabling the trap. Time was running out and each second felt like a lifetime. Juno paused, her eyes landing on a panel hidden behind the pedestal. There, she said, pointing. That might be it. Kestrel rushed over, his fingers working quickly to access the panel. If I can reroute the power, it should deactivate whatever nasty surprise they've got planned. Good thing you're handy with tech, Arlo said, the tension in his voice palpable. Yeah, well, let's hope I don't blow us all up, Kestrel muttered, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked. Juno and Arlo watched anxiously, their hearts pounding in unison as Kestrel tinkered with the panel. The chamber seemed to hold its breath, the hum of energy growing louder with each passing second. Finally, with a triumphant shout, Kestrel stepped back. Got it. The system's down. Arlo wasted no time, reaching for the artifact and lifting it from the pedestal. The room remained silent, no alarms blaring, no deadly traps springing to life. Well, I'll be damned, Juno said, her voice filled with disbelief. We did it, yeah, Arlo replied, a grin spreading across his face. Now let's get out of here before they change their minds. With the artifact in hand, they retraced their steps, the path lit by the same ghostly lights that had guided them in. Their pace quickened, urgency driving them forward as they made their way back to the shuttle. As they exited the ruins, the thin lunar air felt like a breath of fresh hope. The shuttle stood waiting, a beacon of escape promising safe passage back to Selene's cradle. Let's move, Arlo urged, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting the ruins to rise up and swallow them whole. They boarded the shuttle, the artifact securely stowed as they strapped in for the journey back. Arlo fired up the engines, the craft lifting off with a shudder that spoke of wear, tear, and the stubborn refusal to quit. As they ascended, leaving the ruins behind, Kestrel let out a low whistle. I can't believe we actually pulled it off. Never underestimate the power of human chaos, Juno replied, her smile tinged with the satisfaction of defying the odds. Arlo glanced at his team, feeling a surge of pride mixed with the familiar certainty that this wouldn't be the last time they found themselves in over their heads. All right, let's get back and figure out what the hell we just stole. The shuttle soared through the void, each mile bringing them closer to the colony and further from the grasp of the precogs. Arlo couldn't shake the feeling that they'd somehow managed to flip the script, turning human unpredictability into their greatest weapon. As they sped towards home, Arlo couldn't help but chuckle. In a universe that thrived on order and foresight, sometimes the best way to win was simply to embrace the chaos and make it up as you went along. As the shuttle made its less-than-graceful touchdown back at Selene's cradle, a name as poetic as a landfill, the trio disembarked, still buzzing from their brazen snatch and grab. Arlo wasn't sure what was more unbelievable, that they had actually swiped the artifact right out from under the precogs' noses, or that the shuttle hadn't exploded mid-flight given its sorry state. Home sweet oxygen-deprived home, Arlo declared, taking a mock deep breath. The air tasted like recycled despair and engine grease, but at least it wasn't trying to kill them. Yet. Remind me to write a glowing review on Space Yelp, Juno retorted, fiddling with her calm device like it was a stress ball. Kestrel walked beside them, his tool belt jangling like a mechanical symphony. I've decided I much prefer being chased by malfunctioning robots to oxygen shortages. At least the robots don't pretend to be your friend first. They made their way through the bustling corridor of Selene's cradle, which was less a bustling metropolis and more an overcrowded broom closet on a cosmic dust bunny. Everywhere they went, People gave them that special kind of look reserved for lunatics who'd just come back from poking a sleeping bear in the eye. "Look who's back and still breathing," Marlowe called from behind his bar, aptly named the black hole for its ability to suck you in and drain your wallet faster than you could say another round. His expression was somewhere between amused and confused, a common look around these parts. "Yeah, and we've brought presents," Arlo replied, patting the case containing the artifact like it was his pet piranha. "Better be booze, else I'm not interested," Marlowe deadpanned, wiping a glass that looked like it had seen one too many bar brawls. "Sorry, no liquid courage, just world-altering artifacts," Juno quipped. "But we'll take a shot of whatever won't burn a hole in our throats." Kestrel leaned against the counter, eyes darting around like a paranoid squirt. "We need somewhere quiet to work. These walls have ears, and I'd prefer not to end up on the Precog's Christmas card list. Good luck with that." "Only place quieter than this bar is the vacuum of space," Marlowe said, pouring a few shots of something vaguely resembling alcohol. "But there's a back room you could use. Just don't blow it up. I had to bribe 3 inspectors to ignore the last scorch marks, thanks, Marlowe." "We owe you one," Arlo said, knocking back the shot. "It burned like regret and warmed like bad decisions." "Just keep the place from falling apart and we'll call it even," Marlowe replied. With their temporary base of operations secured, Arlo, Juno, and Kestrel slipped into the back room. It was cluttered with the remnants of failed get-rich-quick schemes and enough dust to start a new moon. They cleared a space on the rickety table and set the artifact down like it was a live grenade. "All right, team," Arlo began, adopting a tone that suggested optimism, though everyone knew better. "We've got the artifact, and the precogs are probably throwing a hissy fit as we speak. Suggestions: wait for them to come knocking and offer them cookies," Juno suggested, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Kestrel, ever the engineer with dreams bigger than his pocketbook, rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I think we need to scramble their predictive signals. If we can make it so they can't see us coming or going, that's our best shot. Scramble their signals." Juno echoed with a skeptical raise of her eyebrow. "You got plans to turn the whole moon into a giant white noise machine, sort of." "Hear me out," Kestrel said, animated with the kind of enthusiasm that only precedes very bad ideas. "The colony's infrastructure, especially the old comm towers, could be repurposed to create a signal strong enough to eclipse whatever the precogs are using. We could effectively blind their foresight. And how, pray tell, do we do that without blowing the colony's power supply to bits?" Arlo asked, crossing his arms. Kestrel grinned, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "By not telling the Colony Council, we'll tap into the backup grids they never use. They're just sitting there collecting dust. Sounds like a plan with a high probability of electrocuting someone," Juno noted, but there was a hint of approval in her voice. "Hey, low odds have gotten us this far," Arlo said, rallying his crew with a grin that could cut glass. "All right, let's get to work." As Kestrel worked on his mad scientist scheme, Juno and Arlo played lookout and conspiracy theorist, respectively. The air in the cramped room grew tense, filled with the hum of machinery and the unspoken fear of the unknown. "Think they've noticed yet?" Arlo asked, peering through the dusty window like a man expecting a ghost. "If they haven't, they're even less competent than I thought," Juno replied, drumming her fingers on the table. "Or maybe they're just waiting for us to do something really stupid," Arlo suggested. "Which, given our track record, won't be long." Time stretched like old taffy, every second feeling like a small eternity. Kestrel was a blur of motion, his fingers dancing over wires and circuits, bringing his vision to life, or at least trying not to die trying. Finally, Kestrel stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. "That should do it. Just need to hit the switch and we'll be in business. You sure it'll work?" Juno asked, her voice tinged with caution. "Sure as I am about anything that involves potentially lethal voltages," Kestrel replied with a grin. "But I'd stand back if I were you." They took a collective breath, and with the kind of reckless hope that only comes from having nothing left to lose, Kestrel flipped the switch. The room filled with a low hum as the makeshift system came to life, a soft glow emanating from the artifact as if acknowledging their audacity. And then, nothing exploded, which was always a good sign. "Looks like it's working," Arlo said, more relieved than he'd ever admit. "Now let's hope the precogs are as blind as newborn kittens," Juno added. They didn't have long to wait. The colony's comm channels buzzed with confused chatter, people wondering why their neighbors' toasters were suddenly playing symphonies, and why the vending machines were spitting out ice cream instead of coffee. "Sounds like chaos," Arlo said, a touch of pride in his voice. "Yeah, but it's our chaos," Kestrel replied, satisfaction etched across his face. As the colony struggled to make sense of its sudden technological hiccups, the trio knew they had bought themselves some time. Time to figure out what the artifact was, why the precogs wanted it so badly, and how they could use it to turn the tables for good. "All right, let's get back to the artifact," Arlo said, rolling up his sleeves like a man about to arm wrestle fate. They gathered around the table, eyes fixed on the artifact with the intensity of gamblers at a roulette wheel. It was time to dig deeper, to uncover the secrets that lay within and perhaps, just perhaps, find a way to outsmart the precogs at their own game. As they began to work, the dark humor that had sustained them through thick and thin resurfaced, a reminder of the absurdity of their situation. "Anyone else think it's ironic we're using ancient tech to beat the bringers of foresight?" Juno asked, a wry smile playing on her lips. "Hey, we're just showing them the future's not all it's cracked up to be," Arlo replied, as he examined the artifact with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Kestrel nodded, his fingers dancing over the artifact as he searched for some clue, some hidden mechanism that might explain its power. "Sometimes you've got to go back to move forward." The device, seemingly innocuous, pulsed with a quiet energy, as if it was waiting for the right moment to reveal its secrets. Iors passed in a blur of deduction and trial and error, each failed attempt a step closer to understanding. "Feels like trying to crack open a bank vault with a toothpick," Juno muttered, her patience wearing thinner than the colony's oxygen reserves. "Yeah, but at least we're not doing it alone," Arlo replied, his voice steady despite the circumstances. Their camaraderie was the glue that held them together, each member contributing their own brand of expertise and sarcasm to the task at hand. As they worked, a picture began to form, a puzzle slowly piecing itself together with every twist and turn. "The energy signature's off the charts," Kestrel said, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and disbelief. "If we can harness this, we can turn the tables on the precogs," Arlo finished, a sense of purpose settling over him like an old, comfortable coat. "Assuming they don't catch on and drop in for a visit," Juno added, ever the realist. "Let's make sure they don't," Arlo said, determination etched into his features. "We've got chaos on our side, and if there's one thing the universe can't predict, it's us." It was a mad plan, full of risks and unknowns, but it was their best shot. The precogs might have seen 1,000 futures, but Arlo and his team were determined to make their own path, one reckless choice at a time. As they prepared to face whatever came next, the only certainty was uncertainty. But for Arlo, Juno, and Kestrel, that was more than enough. In a universe that thrived on order, they were the wild card, the chaotic element that no one could predict. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was all you needed to win. The room buzzed with the hum of Kestrel's contraption, and the trio felt a rare moment of calm, a triumph untainted by immediate disaster. But like all good things in life, it was far too short-lived. The artifact, nestled in its makeshift cradle of wires and hope, suddenly pulsed with a light that could only be described as ominous. Is it supposed to do that?" Juno asked, taking a cautious step back. The artifact throbbed like a freshly stubbed toe. Kestrel scratched his head, looking more puzzled than a cat contemplating its own reflection. "Not according to the zero instructions I have." "Great, so we're back in the realm of winging it," Arlo muttered, his eyes glued to the artifact as if it might jump up and start doing a tap dance. Let's hope it's not signaling its buddies. The door to their hideout slammed open, and a figure loomed in the doorway with all the subtlety of a tax audit. It seemed the universe had decided that Arlo and his crew had had enough peace and quiet for one day. "Time's up, Thorn," said a voice that oozed smugness like an oil spill. It belonged to a precog agent, dressed in a uniform so crisp it could cut paper. "Ah, if it isn't the future's least favorite fortune-teller," Arlo replied, flashing a grin that only added fuel to the fire. Beside him, Kestrel and Juno tensed, ready for things to go south faster than a lead balloon. The agent stepped forward, flanked by a small squad of armed-to-the-teeth goons who looked like they'd missed their calling as henchmen in a bad action movie. "You're coming with us. The artifact is yours. Last I checked, Finders Keepers was still in vogue," Juno shot back, her hand inching toward her comm device like it was a revolver in a spaghetti western. The tension in the room ratcheted up a notch, like a spring wound too tight, ready to snap. Arlo assessed the odds, not great unless they could turn sarcasm into a weapon. Kestrel, ever the optimist in a pessimist's body, took a step forward. "Look, we're all reasonable people here. Let's talk this through. Maybe over a drink," the agent's sneer could have sired milk. "The only thing you'll be drinking is the slop they serve in holding cells." Arlo sighed, casting a glance at his team. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. But before he could think of something suitably clever, the agent gestured, and his crew moved in like wolves circling prey. "Okay, hold on a second," Arlo said, raising his hands. "How about a trade? Our freedom for, this very flashy artifact that you could definitely use. I'm sure it's got settings for mind-blowing surprises." "Nice try," the agent replied, his voice dripping with the kind of disdain reserved for salesmen and small-time criminals. "Take them." The room erupted into chaos. Juno, faster than a caffeine-fueled squirt, tossed her comm device in an arc, its screen flashing with a burst of light. It was enough to blind the squad for a precious second. "Run," Arlo yelled, grabbing the artifact and making a beeline for the exit. The trio barreled past the disoriented agents, knocking over chairs and leaving a trail of confusion in their wake. They dashed down the lunar corridor, the dim lights flickering with a sense of foreboding that felt all too familiar. "Any bright ideas?" Juno panted, glancing back to see if they were being pursued. "Working on it," Kestrel grunted, his brain whirring like an overclocked engine. The corridor twisted and turned, a maze designed by someone with a vendetta against straightforward thinking. Arlo could hear the precogs on their tail, the sound of heavy boots a constant reminder of their impending doom. They rounded a corner and skidded to a halt in front of a sealed bulkhead. The control panel blinked at them as if saying, "Good luck, suckers." "Now would be a great time for one of those engineering miracles," Arlo said, throwing Kestrel a look that mingled desperation with a hint of we're-about-to-die levity. Kestrel snorted, pulling a tool from his belt that looked like it belonged in a medieval torture chamber. "All right, give me a minute. Talk amongst yourselves. Maybe discuss our impending capture." Juno leaned against the wall, catching her breath. "Well, this has been a lovely day. All we need now is a surprise visit from a harbinger of doom." "Don't jinx it," Arlo muttered, glancing over his shoulder. The precogs were closing in, their shadows stretching along the corridor walls like a bad omen. Kestrel worked furiously, fingers flying over the panel with the grace of someone who'd spent too many nights in dimly lit rooms. Almost there. The bulkhead creaked open with a groan that sounded like the colony itself was protesting their continued existence. They slipped through and slammed it shut, but they knew it wouldn't hold for long. They found themselves in a vast chamber, the ceiling lost in shadow and the walls lined with ancient machinery that hummed with a life of its own. It was the kind of place that felt like it should come with a warning label. "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." "Where the hell are we?" Juno asked, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "No idea," Arlo replied, setting the artifact down on a console that looked like it hadn't been touched since people thought the moon was made of cheese. Some sort of control center, maybe, Kestrel suggested, his eyes scanning the room for anything useful. Or a storage facility for bad decisions. We've got to figure out what this thing does, Arlo said, gesturing to the artifact. And quickly, before we're knee-deep in precogs, the artifact seemed to pulse in agreement, its light casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls like ghosts of mistakes past. Juno fiddled with her comm device, her fingers moving with the kind of precision that suggested she might have been a concert pianist in another life. I'm trying to get us a signal. Maybe we can call for help. Or at least order a last meal. Get us a pizza while you're at it, Kestrel quipped, his nerves fraying at the edges. I'd like to face certain death with a full stomach. The chamber was silent save for their breathing, the kind of silence that felt like an accusation. Arlo paced restlessly, the weight of the situation pressing down on him like a lead blanket. He couldn't shake the feeling of impending failure, the gnawing certainty that they were playing a game they couldn't possibly win. What if this is it? Juno said quietly, her voice cutting through the gloom. What if we've hit a dead end? Arlo paused, looking at his crew, his friends. They'd come so far, survived unimaginable odds, and yet here they were, cornered like rats in a trap of their own making. Then we go out with a bang, he said, injecting his words with all the bravado he could muster. We've faced worse before, and we've always found a way out. Kestrel nodded, though his eyes betrayed the doubt gnawing at his insides. I've got a few tricks left, but don't expect miracles. Miracles are overrated, Juno replied, her lips curling into a smirk. I'll settle for sheer dumb luck. The bulkhead behind them shuddered, a reminder that time was not on their side. The precogs would breach the chamber any moment, and when they did, the trio would need more than snark and bluster to survive. Arlo turned his attention back to the artifact, its light flickering like a dying star. It held the key to their salvation or damnation, and he was determined to pry it open if it killed him. So, any more bright ideas? Juno asked, her tone laced with the kind of sarcasm that had become their universal constant. Just one, Arlo replied, picking up the artifact with a determined glint in his eye. We make our stand here. The chamber was vast and the odds were stacked against them, but as the bulkhead began to buckle and the precogs prepared to storm in, Arlo felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. They might be outnumbered and outgunned, but they weren't out yet. He placed the artifact at the center of the room, as if daring it to do its worst. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, three unlikely heroes standing against the tide. As the final moments ticked down, Arlo couldn't help but chuckle, a grim smile spreading across his face. You know, I always thought we'd go out in a blaze of glory. Hey, we might still pull off a miracle, Kestrel said, though his voice carried little conviction. Or at least make one hell of a mess, Juno added, checking her comm one last time. The bulkhead gave way with a deafening crash and the precogs stormed in, weapons drawn, faces set in expressions of grim determination. Arlo stepped forward, ready to meet them head-on. All right, folks, let's see if we can't give these future seers a run for their money. In the end, it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about making a stand. About proving that even in a universe where everything was supposed to be foreseen and foretold, there was still room for a little chaos, a little unpredictability. As the first shots rang out and the air filled with the acrid smell of energy weapons, the trio braced themselves for the fight of their lives. Whatever the outcome, they'd made their choice. They would face defeat head-on, with grit, humor, and defiance in the face of the inevitable. And sometimes, Arlo thought, as the chaos enveloped them, sometimes that was enough. The bulkhead crashed down with the subtlety of an elephant in tap shoes, and the precogs poured in with all the enthusiasm of debt collectors at a millionaire's bankruptcy hearing. For a moment, Arlo could only stare, watching as the precogs fanned out like they had rehearsed this scene for weeks. It was almost predictable, And that was the problem. Predictability was their game, which meant the only way to win was to flip the script in a way even the universe hadn't seen coming. "All right," Arlo muttered under his breath, "time to make it weird." He turned to his companions, whose expressions hovered somewhere between "we're all going to die" and "this better be good." "Okay, listen up," he said, adopting a tone that suggested he had any idea what he was doing. "We can't beat them at their own game. They expect us to be logical, clever, even desperate. But what if we play a different tune?" Kestrel squinted, trying to see the sense in Arlo's words like a man searching for a lost contact lens in the desert. "Care to elaborate?" Arlo picked up the artifact, holding it like a particularly volatile grenade. "We give them chaos. We give them unpredictability. We give them us at our most human." Juno raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched into every line of her face. "So what? We dance the Macarena and hope they explode." "Close," Arlo replied, a grin spreading across his face. "We create some decoys, throw in a little misdirection, and let their brains short-circuit trying to figure out which way is up." "Sounds risky," Kestrel said, already fiddling with a nearby console as if to test the solidity of Arlo's plan. "Risky? It's suicidal," Juno added. "But hey, if we're going to die, why not confuse the hell out of them first?" Arlo nodded, the weight of their shared predicament somehow lighter with humor. "Let's get to work then. Time's not exactly on our side." The trio sprang into action with the kind of manic energy reserved for last-minute project deadlines. Kestrel, with his knack for machinery and a penchant for bending reality to fit his needs, began rigging up a series of makeshift projectors. Juno worked on her comm device, rigging it to emit signals as erratic as a caffeinated squirrel on rollerblades. Arlo, meanwhile, focused on the artifact, trying to coax it into giving them more than a pretty light show. He muttered to it like it was an old friend, hoping against hope it might respond to his ramblings. The bulkhead groaned ominously, the precogs creeping closer with a certainty that bordered on arrogance. Arlo could almost hear them thinking, "No way these idiots have a plan." And in fairness, they weren't entirely wrong. "Almost ready," Juno called over the clatter of Kestrel's frantic engineering. "Almost," Kestrel replied, sweat beading on his brow as he twisted wires and muttered curses. "Just need to make sure this doesn't blow us up instead." "Well, if it does, at least we'll die like true pioneers of chaos," Arlo said, putting the finishing touches on their improvised decoys. Finally, Kestrel gave a thumbs up, a gesture that felt like it should have come with a drum roll. "Let's roll the dice." They positioned themselves strategically around the chamber, each holding their breath as Arlo activated the decoys. Instantly, the chamber filled with flickering holograms, each projecting an image of the trio in various states of panic and confusion, a fractured funhouse mirror of reality. The precogs hesitated, momentarily thrown by the sudden barrage of false stimuli. Arlo watched as their faces contorted in confusion, the facade of superiority slipping ever so slightly. "Now, Juno," Arlo shouted, signaling her to unleash the comm device's erratic signal barrage. The air crackled with interference, a symphony of dissonance that scrambled the precog senses. For beings accustomed to seeing the future unfold with the clarity of a well-written novel, this was like handing them a script and then setting it on fire. With the precogs momentarily disoriented, the trio sprang into action. They darted between holograms, weaving through projections that flickered in and out of existence, creating an ever-shifting battlefield that defied logic and strategy. Kestrel moved like a shadow, his engineering skills now turned to misdirection, triggering machinery to sputter and hum with a life of its own. Juno, ever the agile tactician, kept the comm device working overtime, unleashing a cacophony of static that further muddled the precog senses. Arlo, with the artifact clutched tightly, danced through the chaos like a conductor of madness, directing confusion with every step. "Come on, keep dancing," he yelled, adrenaline fueling his every move. The precogs, usually so serene and superior, stumbled in the face of pure, undiluted human unpredictability. Their future sight was rendered useless, tangled in a web of possibilities none of them had considered. For a moment, Arlo allowed himself to believe they might actually pull this off. Maybe, just maybe, they'd live to see another day or at least another bad decision. But the universe had other ideas. As if sensing their impending demise, the precogs rallied, shaking off the initial shock. One by one, they began to focus, their eyes narrowing as they filtered through the chaos, searching for the real threats among the holographic distractions. Arlo cursed under his breath. They were running out of time, their window of opportunity shrinking with each passing second. His mind raced, thoughts tumbling over one another like dominoes in a storm. "Plan B," Juno shouted, her voice tinged with a mixture of hopeful sarcasm and genuine desperation. "Plan B," Arlo confirmed, though he had no idea what that was supposed to be. He glanced around, searching for inspiration among the rubble of their failed gambit. And then he saw it, a control panel on the far wall, half hidden behind a bank of flickering consoles. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but at this point, what did they have to lose? "Kestrel, can you get that panel open?" Arlo called, gesturing wildly. Kestrel followed his gaze, eyes widening as he spotted the potential lifeline. "Worth a shot," he replied, already moving toward it with the determination of a man who had run out of other options. Juno provided cover, her comm device still spewing confusion into the air as Kestrel worked his mechanical magic. Arlo joined him, half expecting the panel to laugh in their faces rather than cooperate. "All right, let's see if this does anything useful," Kestrel muttered, prying open the panel to reveal a mess of wires and circuits that looked like a spaghetti dinner gone horribly wrong. "Think you can make it work?" Arlo asked, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Depends on your definition of work," Kestrel replied, his fingers already dancing across the circuits like a virtuoso pianist. Arlo could feel the pressure mounting, the precogs regrouping and closing in once more. They needed a miracle, or at least a minor catastrophe, to turn the tide back in their favor. And then, just as hope began to wither and die, Kestrel's efforts bore fruit. The panel lit up, a series of ancient systems groaning to life with a low hum that reverberated through the chamber. Arlo could hardly believe their luck. "What did you do?" he asked, disbelief mingling with awe. Kestrel shrugged, breathless but triumphant. "I think I just turned on the facility's self-defense systems." The chamber shuddered as ancient machinery whirred and clicked, long dormant turrets emerging from hidden alcoves, their targeting sensors flickering to life with a menacing glow. For the first time, it was the precogs who hesitated, their confidence shaken by the unpredictable turn of events. Their carefully laid plans unraveled in the face of chaos they hadn't foreseen. Arlo took full advantage, shouting over the din, "Let's move!" While they're still figuring out what the hell just happened, the trio sprinted toward a secondary exit, using the confusion to slip past their adversaries. The turrets whirred to life, tracking the precogs with merciless precision, buying Arlo and his crew precious moments. They burst through the exit, the sound of weapons fire and shouted orders fading behind them as they raced down another interminable corridor. Each step felt like a victory against the implacable odds. As they ran, laughter bubbled up inside Arlo, a wild, defiant sound that echoed off the cold metal walls. Against all logic, against all reason, they had survived, at least for now. Juno shot him a look, equal parts disbelief and relief. "I can't believe that actually worked." Kestrel, ever the realist, tempered the celebration with a reminder of reality. "It's not over yet. We still have to get off this rock." Arlo nodded, the adrenaline leaving him almost giddy with the sheer audacity of their survival. "One step at a time. We keep moving, stay unpredictable, and maybe we'll keep proving them wrong." As they barreled down another maze of corridors, uncertainty still loomed over them like a storm cloud, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like they were the ones holding the reins. And in this universe of certainties and fates written in stone, that was the most satisfying victory of all. As the trio sprinted through the dark, metallic corridors, the distant echoes of gunfire and mechanical whirring reminded them they were one wrong turn away from becoming a victim of their own cunning. The walls weren't closing in yet, but they sure as hell were leaning over, waiting for them to trip. We've got the artifact, confused the hell out of the precogs, and still have all our limbs. I'd call that a pretty good day in the life of a galactic screw-up, Arlo quipped, adrenaline still coursing through him like he'd mainlined a caffeine Roman 4. Kestrel huffed beside him, his voice a mix of amusement and exhaustion. You're setting the bar awfully low there, Arlo. At this rate, tomorrow's success could be managing to tie our shoelaces. Juno, bringing up the rear with her calm device clutched like a talisman of chaos, cracked a grin despite the tension. And here I thought living on the edge was just a figure of speech. Turns out it's more of a lifestyle choice. The labyrinthine corridors of Selene's cradle twisted and turned, a poorly designed rat maze on a massive scale, with a side of existential dread. Arlo glanced over at Kestrel, who was doing a decent impression of looking like he knew where the hell they were going. So, Kestrel, any chance you've got a map stashed in that big brain of yours? Kestrel's laugh came out as a wheeze. I make it a rule not to rely on things like maps. They only ever lead to disappointment. Arlo nodded sagely. Fair point. Maps are like X's always pointing you in the wrong direction. A junction loomed ahead and they skidded to a halt. Juno took a moment to adjust her comm device, ensuring its erratic signals were still throwing the precogs off their scent. Left or right? She asked. Left, Arlo decided, more on a whim than any real sense of direction. I've got a good feeling about it, good feeling. Really scraping the bottom of the strategic barrel now, aren't we? Juno remarked, but she followed anyway, because at this point, what else was there? The corridor stretched ahead, the lighting flickering like a horror movie cliché. Arlo could almost hear the universe cackling at their misfortune. But if the universe wanted to play games, well, Arlo had just the dice for it. As they rounded another corner, a new sound reached them, a low hum that vibrated through the floor and walls, a purring beast awakening from a long slumber. Kestrel's eyes lit up with recognition. Sounds like the shuttle bay. If we're lucky, there might still be a way off this rock. Luck. Now there's a concept, Arlo mused. I was starting to think it was just a bedtime story they told to gullible kids. Juno smirked, adjusting the comm device one last time. Well, either we catch a break, or we're just really committed to dying ironically. As they emerged into the shuttle bay, the vastness of it yawned before them, dotted with decrepit vessels that looked as trustworthy as a used car salesman in a cheap suit. The hum grew louder, revealing a small craft idling in the center, its exterior patched together with what seemed to be more hope than metal. Arlo's eyes locked onto it, his heart flipping a coin between hope and despair. Well, it's either our ride home or a very elaborate death trap. Juno approached the shuttle, tapping its hull. Seems sturdy enough. Then again, appearances have been known to lie. Kind of like you, Arlo, Kestrel chimed in with a grin. Exactly like me, Arlo agreed, already moving to open the hatch. The metal creaked like it hadn't been opened in years, but it relented, revealing a cramped interior that smelled of stale air and regret. With no time to spare, they clambered inside, Arlo taking the pilot's seat. Kestrel slid into the co-pilot's position, his hands moving over the controls with a familiarity that suggested he'd done this dance before. Just maybe not in a shuttle held together by spit and optimism. All right, let's see if we can coax this piece of nostalgia to life, Kestrel muttered, flipping switches. The shuttle shuddered, its systems groaning to life like an old man getting out of bed. Juno wedged herself into the back, her comm device still spewing out nonsense like a tabloid on steroids. How long before the precogs catch up? You think? Arlo shrugged, throwing a glance at the bay's entrance. I'd say they're already planning our funeral, but let's see if we can crash their party first. Engines fired up, the shuttle trembling beneath them as if even it was unsure about this escape plan. Outside, the bay doors began to slide open, revealing the endless expanse of stars beyond, a promise and a threat all at once. "Moment of truth," Kestrel announced, pushing the throttle forward. The shuttle lurched, then surged forward, a reluctant beast finally loosed from its chains. As they shot out into the vacuum, Juno let out a whoop of triumph. "We're doing it. We're actually doing it." Arlo's grin was wild and unrestrained. "Congratulations, folks. We've officially graduated from sitting ducks to temporary survivors." The shuttle veered away from Selene's cradle, its course erratic but determined. Behind them, the precogs would be scrambling, their foresight turned to dust, their confidence shattered by the chaotic dance of human unpredictability. For a moment they floated in the silence of space, the enormity of their near escape settling over them like a shroud. But for all its darkness, it was a shroud of victory. Kestrel's voice broke the quiet, laced with wry humor. "I suppose we should figure out where we're actually going. Otherwise, we're just fugitives with no destination." Juno leaned back, her expression a mix of relief and disbelief. "I think I saw a bar back on the colony where we could drink ourselves into a stupor." "The black hole, wasn't it?" Arlo nodded, feeling the pull of the familiar. "Sounds like a plan. And hey, if we've pissed off the entire precog race, at least we can buy a round for anyone who hasn't tried to kill us yet. Which isn't a very long list," Kestrel added dryly. The shuttle continued its erratic course, guided by the whims of its passengers, three humans who had dared to spit in the face of certainty and laugh at the cosmic joke of destiny. And in the vast, indifferent expanse of space, they were exactly where they needed to be. For now. Arlo Thorne leaned back in the pilot's seat, the controls of the rickety shuttle jittering under his fingers like a nervous puppy. "Well, that was a hell of a ride," he muttered, the absurdity of their survival sinking in like a bad cold. They just outrun a bunch of precogs on a mission that, by all rights, should have left them as nothing more than space debris. But here they were, alive, breathing, and still full of the same reckless spirit that had gotten them into this mess. Kestrel Voss, the colony's most unpredictable engineer, was already fiddling with the shuttle's console, muttering under his breath. "If this thing holds together for another hour, it'll be a miracle. I swear I saw more duct tape than actual metal holding it together." Juno, their resident comms expert and queen of gallows humor, snorted from the back. "Miracles are just the universe's way of saying, you're not dead yet, but give it time." "Speaking of time," Arlo said as he adjusted their course, "we should probably figure out how we're going to explain this little adventure to the folks back at Selene's cradle. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to know we've pissed off an entire race of precogs." Kestrel shrugged. Everybody needs a hobby. As they approached Selene's cradle, the sprawling lunar colony that had been their home and the setting of their most recent debacle, the reality of what they'd achieved began to settle over them. Arlo glanced at the artifact resting in the cargo bay, its ominous pulsing light still a mystery they hadn't quite unraveled. "Well, at least we have proof that we're not entirely insane." "Just mostly," Juno quipped, adjusting her comm device, which had become as much a part of her as her sarcasm. The shuttle docked with a shuddering thud that suggested it was as exhausted as its occupants. As they stepped out onto the hangar deck, the familiar sights and sounds of Selene's cradle greeted them, a cacophony of clanging metal and echoing voices. The air was thin, as usual, a reminder of the colony's frequent oxygen shortages, a charming feature that made every breath feel like a luxury. Marlowe, the bartender from the black hole, appeared like a mirage in the desert, his ever-skeptical expression firmly in place. "Well, look who decided to drop by unannounced. I thought you'd all been vaporized by now." Arlo grinned, clapping Marlowe on the shoulder. "We tried, but the universe just loves keeping us around for its own amusement." Juno waved her comm device. "You'll be happy to know we brought back a souvenir. Something to show the kids when they ask why we don't mess with precogs." A crowd began to gather, word spreading like wildfire through the colony that the trio had returned. Whispers and excited chatter filled the air, a mix of admiration and disbelief. It wasn't every day someone outsmarted precogs and lived to tell the tale. In the middle of the chaos, Thorn, the nickname Arlo wore with a mix of pride and irony, spotted the precog agent who had claimed ownership of the artifact. The man's smug demeanor had deflated like a punctured balloon, his confidence shattered by the trio's unpredictable antics. "Looks like your predictive powers need a tune-up," Arlo called over, his voice carrying a hint of triumph. "Didn't see that one coming, did you?" The agent glowered, but there was no bite behind it. He knew when he'd been bested, and by humans no less. "You think you've won?" Kestrel stepped in, his grin a match for Arlo's. "Winning's a strong word. Let's just say we're pretty good at not losing." As the commotion continued, the artifact was taken to the colony's central hub, where the best minds would attempt to unlock its secrets. For now, it was a trophy, a testament to humanity's resilience and refusal to bow to the whims of fate. The trio made their way to the black hole, the colony's infamous watering hole where they'd spent more time than they cared to admit. The place was packed, a sea of faces eager to hear their story, to celebrate their improbable victory. Marlowe handed them drinks with a flourish. "On the house, heroes, try not to get too used to it." Arlo raised his glass, a wry smile on his lips, "to surviving against all odds. May we continue to defy the universe's best efforts to kill us." Kestrel and Juno clinked their glasses against his, their laughter joining the chorus of cheers from the crowd. For a moment, the burdens of their journey faded away, replaced by the warmth of camaraderie and the sweet, fleeting taste of triumph. As the night wore on, the colony buzzed with a newfound sense of unity, the knowledge that even against overwhelming odds, they could stand together, defy expectations, and carve out their own destiny. It wasn't just a victory for Arlo and his crew. It was a victory for every soul on Selene's cradle who dared to dream of a life without the shadow of alien threats looming over them. Later, as the bar began to empty and reality crept back in, Arlo found himself reflecting on their journey. The unpredictability that had carried them through felt less like a curse now and more like a gift, a reminder of what it meant to be human in a universe that seemed determined to crush that very spirit. "Think we'll ever get a moment's peace?" he asked, half serious. Juno chuckled, glancing at the door as if expecting trouble to walk through at any moment. "Peace is overrated. Besides, what would we do with ourselves without the thrill of imminent danger?" Kestrel leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "We've proven we can outmaneuver precogs and survive against the odds. Who knows what else is possible?" Arlo considered this, a sly grin forming. "I guess we'll just have to stick around and find out. Let the universe throw whatever it wants at us. We'll keep giving it hell." The trio sat in comfortable silence, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But for tonight, they were content to bask in their hard-won victory, knowing they'd earned it. As the lights dimmed and the last patrons trickled out, Marlowe approached their table, a wry smile on his face. "You know, it's not every day someone gives the universe a black eye. You've done us proud." Arlo shrugged, downing the last of his drink. "Just doing what we do best, surviving. Anything else is just a bonus." With that, they rose, leaving the cozy confines of the black hole behind, stepping out into the cold expanse of Selene's cradle. The night sky stretched above them, a canvas of stars and possibilities, a reminder of both the beauty and chaos that lay beyond. Together, they walked into the night, the weight of the past lifting with each step, replaced by the promise of an uncertain but undeniably human future. As they disappeared into the shadows, one couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, humanity's greatest strength lay not in its ability to predict the future, but in its capacity to embrace the unknown with open arms and a ready laugh. And perhaps in the end, that was the kind of unpredictability the universe needed to learn to fear.